Hey, I'm here with Chris Spags. He runs a company called Jetboost, and we got in touch recently and hopped on the phone. And I was really interested in some of the ways that he was thinking about growth and business and marketing. And we decided that we would put together a presentation that Chris is going to walk through, and I'm just going to ask questions as he presents. And we're going to talk about how to build businesses specifically off of platforms. And so Chris is building upon Webflow, and we are going to talk about why he has used that as a business strategy, talk a little bit about his company Jetboost, and then we're going to work towards some more general principles of how to build businesses online. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into the presentation and I'll ask questions intermittently.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much. And that was a great introduction. I'm really excited to talk with you today. So, like you mentioned, I run a company called Jetboost.io. We provide add-ons for Webflow, which, for those of you that are not familiar with Webflow, it is a visual website builder. So you may be aware of Squarespace or Wix. Those are two popular ones. Webflow is similar in that regard in that it lets you build a website without writing any code whatsoever. But it's a tool that's aimed at professional designers. It is very powerful. It is a really strong platform where you can build pretty much any website that you could think of without writing the code. So I was drawn to it almost immediately as soon as I became aware of it and started using it, and eventually ended up building this entire company off of basically the back of this other platform, as you mentioned.
Awesome. So let's get into it. Why don't you start presenting? And as you go, I'll probably interrupt you every couple of minutes. And we have spoken before, and there's a couple things that I want to get to. And so
Sure.
then I'll ask follow-up questions when need be.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let me pull it up here now. Yes, as David's mentioned, he likes to call this riding the wave, which is building a company on the back of an emerging platform. I think it's a great strategy. We've already talked about who I am. So what we'll cover today, this is the benefits that you get from building on an emerging platform. I'm going to break it down into three areas. So the benefits as far as product development, marketing, and support. Then I'll talk about the risks of this strategy because, of course, with every approach, there are pros and cons. So I want to make sure to cover the risks as well. But lastly, I'll finish with ways to mitigate some of these risks or strategies that you might take to, overcome some of these challenges that you'll face. But before we get into all that, I wanted to start with a story. So let's say your dream has always been to sell t-shirts. Now, there are two different approaches you could take. One option would be to open a t-shirt store, selling shirts that you have custom designed yourself. You've got your own retail space. You've got, you have to pay for utilities and other operating expenses. You probably have employees that are managing the store. So just to get started, you've already got significant costs. And this can be particularly daunting if it's your first time running a business. So once you've put all this together, you're finally ready to have your grand opening. Now you've got to figure out how to get people to actually come to your store, what type of advertising and marketing you're going to do. And you'll notice in this image, the store seems like it's located in a strip mall. There aren't just people walking by. So how do you find your customers? It's not that easy. You're just another store in the sea of all the other stores in your town or city. But here's another option. So I lived in Chicago for a number of years, and during baseball season, almost any night of the week, there were thousands of Cub fans at or near Wrigley Field. So what if you tried to sell t-shirts here, as you see these street vendors doing just outside of the ballpark? you'll notice you don't have to worry about finding customers. The Chicago Cubs organization has already done that hard work for you. And look at what you need to get started. Just a bag with some shirts in it, this like wooden board to hang your shirts on. You don't have any employees, so you can get started yourself. There's no rent, very little operating expenses. So it's a much easier t-shirt business to start. But I think most importantly in this image, you see that there's a reliable, steady stream of demand for what you're selling. They're surrounded by potential customers. Now, of course, the major trade-off here is you're no longer selling your custom design t-shirts. You're selling Chicago Cubs t-shirts. And depending on where you're from, that may or may not be a good thing. So obviously that's a bit of a contrived example, but I think it helps to see that image of the t-shirt vendors outside of Wrigley Field surrounded by potential customers. So now let's talk about the real world benefits of building, online businesses and how that applies. As we mentioned earlier, I run Jetboost, and you can see I wanted to show just the homepage of Jetboost and how it is positioned. It is positioned as an add-on product for a larger platform. I mean, we mentioned Webflow. We call ourselves the Webflow sidekick. So we very much accept our role as this add-on tool. And I think that helps because people who are using Webflow, they are a part of the Webflow community, and they just tend to have a general interest in how to do more with Webflow. And so at JetBoost, we want to embrace that. So to start with the product development benefits, the first one is that problems are easier to find. You can go into any product's existing online forum, subreddit, other community, and you'll find their users complaining about tons and tons of problems. I think this is a great way to find problems to solve to start any business. You can also do the same thing if you're creating educational content. You could go to Amazon and read book reviews and find out, okay, here's a book that maybe you were thinking about writing something similar. Read some of the negative reviews, find out why people didn't like this other person's approach to a topic that you've been thinking about writing about. Maybe they describe the book as too long or full of fluff, so you can write the no nonsense guide version of that. It's a really good way to find problems. And to me, it's much easier than trying to solve a very broad problem like project management or marketing automation. These are larger challenges to tackle. So again, you'll be solving smaller problems when you take this approach. You're not the one building the massive platform. You're just focusing on the best solution for one or two issues with that platform.
Real quick, I think that there's something that you said that is really interesting about how if you go on forums and you read what people are asking questions about and what they're saying on Reddit, or whether it's an official company forum, you can often learn a lot about where that company's shortcomings are. And later on, I'll talk a little bit about some of the risks in doing this, but I think that that's a really interesting place to start. Like if you see something that is said over and over and over again, then that might present an opportunity. The question that I will ask now, but won't make you answer now unless you want to, is don't you also have to ask, why hasn't the company built this already? Because surely they know.
Yeah, that is a great question. I plan to talk about that a little bit more in the risk section, but I will say, I think you'll be surprised. Like we always see these larger companies and we expect them to have everything figured out. And a lot of times they themselves are struggling with having enough resources to do everything that everyone is asking for because they are already such a large platform. So oftentimes, and in particular with the case of JetBoost, I've talked to people inside of Webflow who said, there's a good chance they're not going to build many of the same things that JetBoost offers for several years, even though their customer base is like begging for it and willing to use an outside product that is providing that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll get into that a little bit more later. But just to, on the same vein of solving smaller problems, is you can also build a smaller product. So, with JetBoost, I built a tiny MVP in just 4 weeks. And JetBoost is a SaaS application. So typically this is something that may take 6 months to a year. And I've also gone that route before. And if you spend all that time building your product before you actually know that people want it, you may end up, once you finally launch a product, finding out no one wants it. And now you've just lost 6 months to a year. So I always default now to building the tiniest MVP possible. And as we, mentioned, looking at forms and whatnot, you'll see the gaps that these platforms have. And I wanted to just talk about a couple other examples of companies that have done this. So I don't know if you're familiar with super.so or not.
Yep. For Notion?
Yeah. Yeah, for Notion. So they allow you to create a custom web page from a Notion doc with its own URL. I think they also allow you to add like custom fonts and a few other things that Notion doesn't provide yet. So that's one. And then MemberStack, they were the first company to offer user logins and gated content for Webflow. And yeah, we'll also touch on them more later as we talk about, again, a company then building features that your product provides. I also wanted to mention that I don't think this is just relevant for software products. I think emerging platforms are very much in need of educational content as well, because the platform's company is likely to, again, have less resources available to them and just less time. So they probably haven't built enough educational content yet. And some product communities are hungry for this material. I'm sure you have seen this with Rome in the course that you're working on.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I can just hop in here. We saw this with Nat Eliason and his course Effortless Output that is focused on Rome. And Rome is notoriously hard to use. Nat came out with the best onboarding sequence. And the reason why this was a no-brainer was because Rome isn't going to have the resources or be able to get around to teaching people how to use the product for a long time. And so not only did it present a good business opportunity, but it presented a good business opportunity because Rome knew that they needed help. And so they gave anybody who took the course $100 in free credits after it first came out. And the course cost $100. So Rome effectively subsidized Nat's work and made the course free for people who were interested in Rome, because they would pay $100, get 100 credits back, and Nat took all the profits from that, and it was extremely profitable for him.
Yeah, I think finding those win-wins for both the platform and your product are huge. I know Webflow does something similar with a lot of the course creators who are building educational content around Webflow. So yeah, that's super smart. Next is the benefits about marketing. And this is, to me, where some of the big benefits are, especially as a person who, my background is much more on the product side and the development side, and less so on the marketing side. So getting the benefits of building on another platform as far as marketing goes has been huge for me. Number one, it's easier to know who your customer is. Like with the t-shirt metaphor, you're selling to Cubs fans, not just a generic person who you know nothing about them. You don't know if they may or may not want a t-shirt. So with JetBoost, I'm selling to Webflow users. I know what they have in common. I know how they think about the world, their likes, their dislikes, and focusing on just that group of people makes it easier to, number one, build a better product for them, and number two, market it to them in a way that makes them really want to use the product. Next is the excitement and momentum around emerging platforms. This is something I hadn't experienced before Jetboost. So if you're on a newer platform like Webflow, like Roam, their early customer base probably has a lot of early adopters. And early adopters like to share things. So you will start to get organic word of mouth growth. These platforms have very tight-knit communities. And so if you're providing good content or a good product or solution for a problem with that platform, it can spread like wildfire without much doing on your own. As you mentioned, you saw as well. I think another important point is you get free growth as the platform grows. So if, I don't know how many users Roam has today, but let's say it's 50,000. If by next year they have 100,000 users, like the total market for your course has now just doubled through zero effort on your part. And so I think that is a major benefit. And I'm seeing that with Webflow as well. And then the last point is less competition. This is a bit of a trade-off, which we'll get into. But with emerging platforms, there is just less competition to build these types of products. So if I was to go and do provide similar solutions as Jetboost does for, say, WordPress or Shopify, those are much larger, more entrenched communities. And so, you can go into the Shopify store and search for an add-on, and you're going to find pages and pages and pages of the same add-ons doing the same thing. Webflow doesn't have that right now. Now, the flip side is the Webflow market is tiny compared to WordPress or Shopify. So, you're trading competition for total market size.
Right.
Basically. Yeah. Lastly, on the support side, this is something I didn't really think about before Jetboost because I hadn't had a lot of experience directly serving customers. But the platform can help mitigate support issues for your product as well. They might handle common challenges like accepting payments, issuing refunds, helping with the community. So I think Substack is a good example of this, where they let you just focus on, if you want to sell a paid newsletter, they let you focus on just writing the content. You don't have to worry about how do I set up a website? What email provider do I use? How do I accept payment for people? The platform handles all of that for you, and you can just focus on producing the best newsletter possible. Another benefit that I've seen specifically with Jetboost is the parent company shields you from shady customers. Now, this might be maybe more specific to software, but there is another product I'm familiar with. It's called Card with 2 R's. It's have you heard of it or no?
I've heard of it. I don't know what it does.
Okay, so it's basically a website builder, but I've heard the founder talk about how he has had to a big challenge for him has been dealing with content moderation. So anyone can sign up and build a website using his service, but that means anyone can sign up. So, hate speech groups, human traffickers, illegal arms dealers, whatever, you name it, wow, they can use his service to build websites that, could get him in hot water. So he's had to think about, how do I monitor what's being built with my tool? How do I take those down in a timely manner? And with Jetboost, I don't have to worry about any of that because they have to get through Webflow first. Chances are they'll already be kicked off of Webflow before they even get to Jetboost. And if someone did get through, I would just report them to Webflow. So that's been a cool benefit too.
Yeah, that's like selling T-shirts inside the stadium.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's perfect. So those are the benefits. But now, what are the risks? And let me start with a quote from one of my mentors, Michelle Hansen, who is the co-founder of GeoCodio. And she says, don't build your house on someone else's lawn. And to me, that really cuts to the heart of the risks when building on another company's platform. You're giving up control uh, of your own destiny, really, in some regard. The first risk is, I think we touched on this earlier, competition from the platform itself. So, if you're going into the forums and you're looking at these features and thinking, maybe I can build a solution around these, you do have to try and do some research or consider how likely is it that the platform is going to address these, and in what sort of time fashion will they likely do this. So I did a lot of this research up front with Webflow before I even wrote a single line of code for Jetboost. And for me, I made the determination that I was willing to accept this risk because it seemed like I could move quickly enough with Jetboost to continue building new features and staying a little bit ahead of the curve with Webflow. But some companies like Apple are notorious for copying products built on their platform and then eventually competing with those products. So it really helps to do your research here and try and determine if this is a big risk for you or not.
And what made you say that JetBoost wouldn't be a competition besides the fact that you could move faster?
Uh, a couple things. Number one, just looking at it's somewhat public. It's a little bit tricky to figure out, but there is like a Webflow roadmap available that you can look at. And so trying to determine when I thought they might address some of the JetBoost features that I was looking into building. And number two, knowing that right now Webflow doesn't have an app store or a marketplace, but I know they want to get to that point eventually. So for me, I thought, okay, I'm going to try and build up this JetBoost product as a Webflow brand. And even if Webflow eventually builds all the features that JetBoost currently has, someday, hopefully, they're going to open up a true marketplace or app store. And I can go into that with this very early mover advantage as far as both the JetBoost brand and the Webflow community, and also, hopefully access to be one of the first builders in that ecosystem.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, this is, along similar lines, the platform may make your service obsolete. Any major change that the platform makes to their product is a risk for your product. So if Webflow makes a major change, it could potentially break JetBoost, which would be, of course, on me to figure out how to resolve that. Or if you're providing educational content, it could quickly become out of date as major new versions of the software are shipped. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. The next one we've seen happen with both YouTube and Amazon, where the platform ends up squeezing you out of revenue. YouTube's notorious for changing their algorithm, their payout structure, and other factors, and they've wiped out creators' revenue overnight. And Amazon's done this same thing with reducing affiliate revenue share over time. So what looks like a great business in the beginning ends up being a business that may not be able to survive long term.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a guy who runs one of the largest tennis SEO sites in the world, and that's been his business for years. And after Amazon changed the percentage that they gave for affiliate link purchases, he changed all of the URLs from Amazon and onto Tennis Warehouse, and now is directing people there. And it's exactly what you're saying. He just got to the point where the change that Amazon made by presumably switching a couple buttons made it so that his business was something like less than half as profitable as it used to be. And he needed to say, what am I going to do now?
Right. And that's through no fault of his own. So that is one of the big risks of this strategy. And then the last one is particularly relevant for emerging platforms, and that's the platform may never hit a critical mass of customers. So the market may remain too small to support these add-on businesses or educational content that you're providing, or worst case, the platform itself has to shut down. And so it's very important to make careful bets when you're choosing a platform to build for.
How did you know Webflow was going to take off? What were some of the signals that you were looking at there?
Yeah. So Webflow had been around since 2013, which it seems like in the last 2 years, they've really started to kind of hit that strong exponential growth. But I listened to a number of interviews with the CEO on podcasts or other places, and just tried to get a sense for the size of their business currently and where they were headed. And all signs seemed to be pretty good. And the final kicker was, this was after I started Jetboost, but I think maybe 3 months after is when they raised their $72 million Series A, which was obviously a good indicator for them.
They were valued at $72 million?
They raised $72 million, actually, I believe.
Wow. Yep. Yeah. That is that's a pretty strong signal.
Yeah, it's crazy. I want to make sure I get that right now, but I believe they raised 72 million. It was insane.
So, yes, that was the exact question I had.
All right, perfect. Then let's keep rolling through. Yeah, so ways to mitigate these risks. I think there are 3 main ways. The first one is expanding the scope of your product. This is what I've done with Jetboost so far. So I've got a picture here of the 3 products that are currently offered by Jetboost. But when Jetboost started out, like I said, it was a tiny MVP, and the only product that was offered was the bottom one there, the real-time on-page search. So if Jetboost had stayed with just this, it's just this search product, as soon as Webflow introduced that feature themselves, like that could potentially wipe out 100% of the Jetboost customer base. So now I'm trying to continue to expand within the Webflow platform, solve these other problems, and actually there's going to be a 4th Jetboost product launching tomorrow, so that'll be pretty exciting. And yeah, if Webflow builds one of these, now there are the other ones that are still holding up the company. So diversifying within the platform can be a good strategy, but you're still on the same platform. So most times companies take that one step further and actually expand their product to other platforms. This would be somewhat like what you mentioned with moving from Amazon to Tennis Warehouse, where you have the ability to shift to another platform. I've seen this with the company I mentioned earlier, MemberStack, who was providing, they still provide user logins and gated content for Webflow, but they also expanded to Squarespace, WordPress, and a number of other CMS platforms so that they weren't totally tied to Webflow. And it actually became particularly relevant because last month Webflow announced that they are going to start working on user logins themselves. So, I mean, smart by the MemberStack crew to see that ahead of time and head it off, basically. With Jetboost, I have thought about this before. I've been asked by a few people, why not expand to Shopify or some of the other platforms? And a little bit, unfortunately, Jetboost is so closely coupled with Webflow that it would be quite difficult. It'd be basically building a new product
Hmm.
to expand to other platforms. So that's a bit of a challenge that I'm facing now, and probably is not a strategy that I will pursue. But the third one is interesting. This was uh, Michelle Hansen, who I mentioned earlier, had brought this to my attention, which is create new products for your existing customers. So presumably you understand your customer base well. With Jetboost, it's the majority of the customers are designers, either working for a company or they're freelancers or they work for an agency. So I can look at what problems they have in common that are unrelated to Webflow and try to provide solutions to those problems for them. Uh, and again, this is not a strategy that's limited to if you're building on top of another platform. I think it's always a good strategy to sell and market other products to your existing customer base or audience, whether that's if you're a content creator and you have courses and ebooks and a community and all these different things that you can market to the same audience. That can be definitely a good way to go.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that on the other end of the scale for a venture scale company, I think this is what Stripe has done a really good job of. Stripe does
Mm,
really thinks about what are all the things that you're going to need when you're running a business online, and then let's just continue to build those things. And they started with something so simple, which was accepting payments on the internet. And now, if you've traced the trajectory of the company, they have things like Stripe Atlas, which allow you to incorporate an LLC, which is what I use to do it. And as you go through that process, they're very good at just knowing, okay, these are the next things that are going to come up. You're going to need a bank account. Here you go. You're going to need an accountant. Here you go. You're going to need to file your taxes every year or multiple times a year. Here you go. And they do a very good job of taking you basically down the escalator of starting a company and basically having all these exhibits of would you like this, would you like that. And I think that one of the things that you realize when you run a product is that almost all of your customers, they have the same questions, and
hmm
they are quite similar and easy to bracket in terms of buckets. Now, they're not all the same. There are always edge cases, but in terms of building and in terms of anticipating the needs of your customers, they will often tell you exactly what is needed next. And there are problems that emerge. So you solve one problem and then they keep going, and then new ones begin to emerge. And it's pretty easy to underestimate what those emergent problems will be because you can't actually see them when you're building the solution for the problem that came before it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Number one, I think Stripe is a fantastic example of that. And number two, I've that's exactly what I've done with JetBoost. When I started, I knew there was this search problem. That was really all I knew about. But once you start solving problems for people, then, like you said, they come to you with other problems. And so every JetBoost product that's been released has been because people have been asking for it. And once you have a strong enough signal, you can just go do that and have customers from day one, which is great.
Fantastic. I have one question based off of something that we were talking about when we were speaking on the phone, and that is about watching people who consistently produce and ship, and how production has been highly correlated with success for you.
That's a really good point. I've just noticed that in people that I follow, and with myself as well, is that consistency and production seems to correlate with success over uh, any other factor that I've seen. Someone who I'm close friends with, Pat Walls, he writes a daily blog post every day. If he misses a day, he donates to charity. And people tell him, he's like, I hear it all the time that you're such a great writer. And he doesn't consider himself to be a great writer, but because he's consistently producing over time, like naturally your writing's going to get better. You're probably going to be more interested in it and start, doing a little bit more reading on how to write well and learn that skill. And yeah, I've seen it with myself, and I've been running Jetboost for a year now, and there have definitely been times where I have just wanted to quit, especially in the early days when things are real tough and it doesn't always seem worth it. But you can have bad days, you can even have bad weeks or even a bad month, but as long as you overcome that and keep going forward and keep consistently producing, it seems to correlate pretty strongly with success. I think it's the difference of you go to somebody's blog and you see 2 blog posts versus someone who kept at it day after day after day.
Yeah. I mean, as someone, so I'm writing 100 articles in 100 days right now. And as someone who teaches people to write, it is highly correlated with success. There's a certain amount of just reps that you want to be able to get. And I see it with my students all the time that in rite of passage, the biggest difference for people who are long-term successful is how often did they publish. It's really that simple. And I've also been seeing it. I've been trying to get really good at tennis, and rather than hitting back and forth with my friend, she and I, we go and we get a ball machine and we just rip ball after ball after ball, and we go out a couple times a week and we hit a couple hundred tennis balls. So we're doing probably 1,000 hits a week. And she said to me, "You have improved faster than anyone I've met." And it's just because of that raw, just drilling, getting after it. And I think that if you can combine those sort of reps with then always making sure that your form is better and having good feedback, like I'm doing now, I'll be doing a tennis lesson every other week. And then that's just basically a check-in and the barometer. And I think that there's an equivalent there to what you were saying about your friend who starts writing and then starts reading about how to write better. And you just go, and through the dance of reps and learning, good things begin to happen. And I think that it's particularly true for software-based endeavors because the cost of failure is so low and the feedback loops are so fast.
Yes, 100%. Jetboost wasn't the first software company that I tried to start. And I spent many years in sort of this analysis paralysis phase where I wasn't really getting the reps. I wasn't outputting. I was just spending a lot of time reading or consuming, whether it was about business or software. But as soon as I stopped doing that and started just focusing on producing, like the first products that I tried to build were not ever going to be successful businesses, but it put me on that path to keep, first of all, number one, just get comfortable with failing, and then 2, keep persevering and moving forward. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing.
Yeah. Chris Spags, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This is a lot of fun.